National interest of a country is known as the goal or the ambition of the state, whether economic, military or any other subject. And the national interest is primarily multifaceted. It's starting from the growth, the population, education, as well as preservation of culture, heritage and archaeology of the state is quite important, and it plays a huge role in the development process. And to talk about the archaeology of Sri Lanka and the national heritage and the culture of Sri Lanka, today we have in this edition of Crossfire, an exclusive production of the Government Information Department, Professor Jagath Weerasingha, Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology. Welcome, Professor.
My pleasure to be here.
Welcome. First, would like to know the subject archaeology. What's the present situation in Sri Lanka?
Well, you know, Sri Lankan archaeology has a long history. Well, the Department of Archaeology was established in something like the last decade of 19th century. And, well, like archaeology, like history, all these subjects are what we call colonial projects. Right. It's the white master who established these disciplines, writing about history as such, as an academic discipline. I know archaeology as an academic discipline, or archaeology as an institutional discipline, and study of architecture, study of history of architecture. These were all colonial interests, you know. Well, let me say something about the colonial baggage in archaeology. It is very necessary to see the colonial aspects in archaeology for you to think of archaeology's future in Sri Lanka. And you see all these colonial officers, like, you know, Mortimer Wheeler, John Marshall, those people worked in India, and H.C.P. Bell. I mean, they were not trained archaeologists as such. They were civil servants. Yeah. But you see, during that time, those colonial gentlemen who came to our part of the world, they all also had certain other interests of the place that they were controlling. So one way of controlling a place, what is the best way of controlling the place, is to have ownership of on the history of the place. Well, this is our reading of colonial archaeology from today. But anyway, that's what they did in many ways. So archaeology as a discipline began in a colonial womb. So H.C.P. Bell was our first archaeological commissioner of archaeology. Yeah. Up until Senath Paranithana, you know, later on in early decades of 20th century. So we have now completed more than 120 years of archaeology, or institutionalized archaeology in this country, and about 6 universities in Sri Lanka has departments of archaeology, which is very interesting. But in India, there are only 2 departments of archaeology in Indian universities that offers undergraduate degrees in archaeology. There are more for postgraduate degrees in archaeology. And we began our postgraduate Institute of Archaeology only 25 years ago. So to be specific, 24 years ago. So next year, my institute, the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology, will be having its silver jubilee. Okay, going back to archaeological status in the country. So we teach archaeology at undergraduate level, and we have 120 or so years of history of doing archaeology, and that's a very interesting development there. Our way of doing archaeology, you know, it is within archaeology that we studied so many other things like art history. See, to you said this Professor Senath Paranithana would only be an archaeologist, but he is also an art historian. Senaka Bandaranayake is an archaeologist and an art historian. And Ananda Kumaraswamy is an art historian, but he is not an archaeologist. What I am telling you is it is within the discipline of archaeology that we did art history. And also we did anthropology, like people like Seligman, who studied on Vedas. They were also part of within the broad discourse of archaeology.
Are you also a contemporary artist?
Artist, I am in archaeology. So Sri Lankan archaeology, history of Sri Lankan archaeology is very interesting. It has its own dynamics. Because of that, it also has its own problems. Sometimes, now, you know, since becoming the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology, it has become my duty to do archaeology in a certain way, also to think the future of archaeology. You see, whatever I do as an archaeologist, okay, whatever I do is also archaeology. When I teach, that is archaeology. When I develop a curriculum on archaeology, that is also archaeology. Archaeology is not only what you do in the field digging a hole. You see, archaeology is what archaeologists do.
Whatever.
Well, within the discourse of archaeology as such, within the disciplinary or institutional parameters of archaeology. For example, when I have my board of management meeting of the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology, that is also archaeology, because the decisions we take have an impact on what we teach and what we will be doing.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, within the institutional parameters, whatever we do is archaeology. So this is what the general public will also have to understand. Archaeology is
not just digging a hole.
No, this dirt archaeology is not only archaeology. Archaeology has so many other aspects. Branches as well. Now, coming to the difficult question, a rather uncomfortable situation. It's like, are we in par with the rest of the world when doing archaeology? If you ask one of Sri Lanka's best archaeologists, like Dr. Siran Deraniyagala, who I admire a lot, he would say no. He would say, no, you guys don't know how to do archaeology as yet. Well, he would say, you don't know how to dig properly. But if you ask me, I would say, no, sir, we do it very well. I tell you why I say that. Because I'm looking at Sri Lanka's archaeology from a history of archaeology in the world. I mean, if you go to North America, if you are going to study archaeology in a North American university, none of the universities in the United States have departments of archaeology within the universities. They have department of anthropology. They study archaeology in our anthropology department.
All right, okay.
So
America department for that subject.
No, because they don't think of archaeology as such.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for that. If you have the patience in your mind, I can tell you
of course.
why.
Go ahead.
You see, like in America, people study archaeology within anthropology department. In Sri Lanka and India, you study archaeology within departments of archaeology. And in certain places in India, you study archaeology within departments of ancient history.
All right.
And in England, you have departments of archaeology.
Mm-hmm.
So why is this difference? Because we do archaeology in different ways in different parts of the world.
Uh-huh.
Because, as I said earlier, you see, archaeology has a very stinking colonial history behind it. Mm-hmm. So in America, so all these white folks that went to America since, say, the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, and when they colonized America, one thing they did was they pushed the natives to the margin. So they want to understand a living group of people who they thought they're not civilized. So they wanted to study a living group of people that were living in front of them, which they wanted to internalize into their thinking as an uncivilized people, or a group of people who are lower than us. But when the white man came to Sri Lanka and India, they couldn't do that. They had a group of people, a community, and what these big stupas, big tanks, and big civilization.
Yeah.
Two different situations. So in that country, they developed anthropology. That means when you are an anthropologist, you study a group of people and their behaviors, their culture, while looking at the very people you are studying. When you're an archaeologist, you never meet the people you study, because you do archaeology through material remains of the past.
All right.
That's the main difference. You see, archaeology is the past tense of anthropology. That's clear,
Yeah.
Simple as that. Okay.
So you mean to say that we two are in a different note at the moment, or the world standings and the Asian standings?
Let me tell you that. I think that question itself is wrong in a way. When you say standards, you imply that they have better standards than us. You see, like, my approach is different. I myself had my master's education in the States. So I do appreciate American education. I think it's one of the best places to study anything. I think American education is one of the best education that you can get. They really teach you in American universities. So that's besides the point. What I'm saying, I'm not condemning the education. What I'm telling you is, I'm not condemning way they do archaeology or whatever. No. I'm saying that, our standards are results of our history, are results of our anxieties. And we have to critique them from that point of view, not from a point of view which is outside of Sri Lanka. It doesn't make sense in the end. You see, you cannot bring in American standards of doing archaeology into ours. Because can you think of a world archaeology? Well, there is a thing called World Archaeological Congress. Like in human rights, is there anything called World Human Rights? Like it's same in any discipline. If you try to conceptualize or to theorize or to set standards or something like world archaeology standards, then who would be owning those standards? So you will be subjected to an inferior position when you try to think of that kind of standards. Of course, there are so many ways archaeologists do archaeology. Japanese do archaeology differently from the Chinese or the Americans, and the Brits do it differently, and Europe does it yet a different way. So this is, well, I'm not justifying our mistakes or our weaknesses in doing archaeology.
You mean to say that there are mistakes at...
of course, there are problems. There are many problems in the way that we do archaeology, at least from my point of view.
Yeah.
Because it's my duty now to look at them. I cannot be what you call a person very happy with what I'm doing and sit on my chair as the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology and say, okay, we are doing fine. No, my job is now to see more into it. You know what I mean? Like, anyway. So if you ask one of the best Sri Lankan archaeologists, Dr. Siran Deranegala, he's a Harvard PhD. Even in a recent meeting with the Minister of Cultural Affairs, in the meeting he just casually said, Sri Lankans' standard of excavation is not up to the point. But I do have issues with that. But on the other hand, how can you say that?
Who sets the point?
Yeah, who sets the point? On the other hand, if you think that it's my job now, because I am in a place to train archaeologists. You see the point?